Okay, good morning. Okay. All right, so the topic today is if you want it, go give it. Right? So some people, like when I tell them that, what does it mean? So, of course, it's about generosity, right? The Buddha says that a generous person can be compared to a lovely lake with clear, blue, cold, delicious, crystalline water which lies near a village or township from which people can draw water, drink from, bathe in it, and use it for any other purpose. So for us Buddhists, generosity is a way for us to practice the release from attachment and egoism by giving freely whatever we have that is of value, be it material in nature or it could be our time, energy, and wisdom. Dana is one of the three kinds of meritorious behavior along with sila, which is ethical behavior, bhavana, and mental development through meditation. And generosity is also regarded as one of the paramitas or perfections that a bodhisattva achieves on the way to enlightenment, along with such virtues as patience, discipline, and wisdom. Dana is also understood as a form of kindness and compassion, practice motivated by unconditional caring for another. So when we practice generosity, it reverberates out into unknown directions, right, over indefinite time. So it just goes out and it just replicates itself. But when we give up, when we generously provide, then we do gain something back in return. We gain and we grow. So Buddha has taught that there are 5 blessings that accrue to the giver of dana. One is the affection of many people. And then the second, noble association. And then when you give generously, you also gain good reputation. And then as you give more, you gain more confidence. And then finally, the Buddha says that when you're generous, then you can accumulate more merits and then you can have a heavenly rebirth. So that was taught by Buddha 2,600 years ago. So now we are 2,600 years later. Let's see what science has to say about Buddha's teachings when it regards to the benefits that accrue from generosity. So I don't have a lot of original thoughts. So a lot of the materials I get are from things that I've read and books that I have come across. So this book was given to me by an intern in my company a few years ago. It's by Professor Adam Grant, and it's called Give and Take, Why Helping Others Drive Our Success. So it's commonly accepted that like someone's success is attributed to 3 factors, right? Motivation, hard work, which means greed. Like if you practice enough, Malcolm Gladwell says that 10,000 hours is the magic number. Once you have put in 10,000 hours, then you'll be kind of like expert in that particular area. So hard work, motivation. And then the second part would be ability or natural talent, right? Some people are born with certain talents, but even if you have talents and you don't work hard at it, then it can be wasted. And then thirdly, if you have talent and you work hard at it, but then if you're not given the opportunity, there's like lack of a little bit of luck, that somebody to give you that break, then you may not succeed. So the luck element and the opportunity has to be there as well. But there's actually a 4th factor as well that contribute to our success. So success depends heavily on how we approach our interactions with a lot of people. So every day we come into contact with a lot of people, situations, etc. So every time when we interact with another person at work or any random person, we have a choice to make, right? Do we try to claim as much value as we can, or do we try to contribute value without worrying about what we receive in return? Social scientists have found that there are people basically differ in our way of reciprocity, right? How our desired mix of taking and giving. So there are basically three main groups, which are the takers, the matchers, and the givers. So takers, as the name suggests, they tilt the reciprocity in their own favor. Right? They put their interests first ahead of others. They believe that the world is very competitive. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. So if you want to succeed, you have to fight very hard. And then they feel that they have to be better than others. And to prove their competence, they self-promote. They try to claim as much credit as they can in whatever they do. And then when they help with a reason, they help strategically, right? Only when the benefits to them outweigh the personal cost, then they'll do it. And then generally, the garden variety of takers, they're not cruel, they're not cutthroat, they're just cautious and self-protective, right? So their mentality is that if I don't look after myself first, then no one will. The givers in the workplace, well, they are very rare, right? So givers are the people who will tilt the reciprocity in the other direction. They prefer to give more than they get. So they help without expecting anything in return. And they're generous in sharing their time, energy, knowledge, skills, ideas, and connections with other people who can benefit from them. So some of us, we act as givers in close relationships, right? But maybe in different settings, then we have a different kind of approach. So in close relationships, in marriages, in our family, we may contribute without keeping score. So we are givers in those respects. And then the third category would be the matchers. So these are the people who strive for balance, right? Equal balance in giving and getting. And then they operate on the principle of fairness. When they help people, they protect themselves by seeking reciprocity. And then it's governed by equal exchanges of favors. So most of us, I think, we kind of fall into this category when it comes to work. But as mentioned, the lines are not hard and fast, right? We may act in different behavior in different situations. So if you're negotiating your salary, so maybe you may act as a taker. Or when you're mentoring your junior, then you may be a giver. So when you're sharing expertise with a colleague, you may be a matcher. But most of us, we have a primary reciprocity style, which captures how we approach most people most of the time. So what does research say about the success of people who give more than they receive, right? So research shows that givers sink to the bottom of the success ladder. Right, so across a wide range of important occupations, givers are at a disadvantage because they make others better and they sacrifice their own time and effort to make other people succeed. So there's this research in the engineering field that they surveyed 160 professional engineers in California and rated one another to give whether they are more likely to give or receive. So the least successful engineers were those that gave more than they received. And the givers scored worse in the number of jobs done, technical reports and drawings completed, not to mention errors made, deadlines missed, and money wasted. So going out of their way to help others prevented them from getting their own work done. In the medical school, a study was done in Belgium among 600 medical students. So the students with the lowest grades had usually high scores on the giver statements like, oh, I love to help others. I anticipate the needs of others. So the givers went out of the way to help their peer study, sharing what they already knew at the expense of filling the gaps in their own knowledge. So they gave their peers a leg up at test time and then they fall behind. And then in sales, study done among the North California salesperson, this Professor Adam Grant compares givers, takers, and matchers. And then they found that givers brought in 2.5 times less annual sales. because they were concerned about what is the best for their customers, so they're not willing to sell very aggressively. So are givers losers? So when you see some of the research across occupations, it appears that givers are just too caring, too trusting, and too willing to sacrifice their own interests for the benefits of others. So there's even evidence that compared takers on average to givers, and then givers earn 14% less money. And then they have twice the risk of becoming victims of crimes. And then they are judged as 22% less powerful and dominant. So if givers are at the bottom, then who are at the top, right? Takers or matchers? Well, the surprising thing is it's givers as well, right? The California engineers who had the highest productivity scores are givers as well. So they are at the bottom and they're also at the top. So the Belgian medical students with the highest grades are givers as well. And the top performing salespeople, they average 50% more annual sales, they are givers as well. Then what about politics? So Mark Twain has this quote that says, "The principle of give and take, that is diplomacy. Give one and take 10 when it comes to politics." All right. And then Bill Clinton said that politics is a getting business. You have to get the support, you have to get contributions, you have to get votes over and over again. So then do takers have an edge when it comes to lobbying and outmaneuvering their opponents in competitive elections? Let's look at the story of Samson. So Samson spent early years on a farm, right? At age 23, he decided to run for state legislature seat. Out of 13 candidates, he finished 8. And then after he lost, he set up shop with a friend. The business failed. And then shortly after, his business partner passed away. So Samson had to take over the debts. So he owed 15 times more than his annual income. It took him years, and he eventually paid back every cent. Then, at age 25, he made a second run for state legislature. He managed to get a seat, served for 8 years, and then earned a law degree during that time. And then at age 45, he was ready to pursue influence on the national stage. So he made a bid for Senate. And then he was up against 2 guys, James Shield and Lyman Trumbull. So both were Supreme Court justices, and then they were from backgrounds far more privileged than Samson's. So when they did the poll, Samson was the surprise front runner. He had 44% support. Shield was close behind at 41%. Trumbull was a distant third at 5%. In the next poll, Samson gained ground. Now he's 47% support. But the tide turned when a newcomer joined the race. Right? The current governor, his name was Joel Matheson. He was very popular. And then he came in, and then he took the lead at 44% vote. Samson was down to 38, and Trumbull was just 9. But hours later, Trumbull, when earlier polls said that he only had 9% of the votes, he won the election with 51%. And he narrowly edged out Matheson, who had 47%. So what happened? So when Matheson entered the race, Samson began to doubt his own ability to garner support to win. He knew that Trumbull had a small but loyal following who would not give up on him. So most people in Samson's shoes would lobby Trumbull's followers to jump ship, right? Why don't you vote for me and then I'll serve you. But then Samson's primary concern wasn't to get elected. It was to prevent Matheson from winning, because Samson believed that Matheson was of questionable personality and ethics, right? So he was bribing influential voters. So Samson believed that Trumbull, that they had the same stance on various issues, so they have the same value system, so he would rather back somebody who can win. So he gave up on his race. So Samson decided to withdraw from the race and ask his supporters to vote for Trumbull. 4 years later, Samson again ran for Senate. Again, he lost. But in the weeks leading up to the vote, one of his most outspoken supporters was Trumbull. And another supporter was Norman Judd, who was behind Trumbull in the earlier election. He hadn't forgotten how Samson was so generous in supporting Trumbull earlier. And 2 years later, Samson finally won his first election on the national level. And then he became one of America's top politicians. Any guesses who Samson is? It's Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. So when we initially concluded that Lincoln lost, we hadn't stretched the time horizon long enough. Right? It takes time for givers to build goodwill and trust among the people, and then eventually when they establish the reputations and relationships that will enhance their success. So being a giver is not good for a 100-meter dash. It's valuable in a marathon. So why givers win in the end? When givers succeed, it spreads and cascades because they are always looking out for what's good for most people, right? So when they succeed, then they'll spread their success to other people. And then givers succeed in a way that creates ripple effect, enhancing the success of people around them. So if it is easier to win if everyone wants you to win, right? If you don't make enemies out there, then it's easier to succeed. And research shows that people tend to envy successful takers, right? If you're very greedy and very selfish and you are winning a lot of time, people envy you and they try to knock you down a notch. In contrast, when givers win, people are rooting for them and supporting them rather than gunning for them. So Buddha said that givers gain all these things. So in research, I think we are seeing that it is actually showing that all these are accruing to the giver. So what Buddha said 2,600 years ago, it's being proven in science today, a lot of areas. But of course, times have changed. In Lincoln's area, marathon took a long time, right? To build your reputation, you have to write letters, and then you have to send it through like card or whatever to get to the certain person. Today, we have telephones, we have internet, we have high-speed transmission, we have Facebook. So building relationships and reputations can be much faster. And technology actually amplifies the advantage of being a giver. The other thing that has changed today is that nowadays in a lot of workplaces, companies work in teams, right? You have groups and teams that work together on a project. And then teams depend on givers to share information, volunteer for unpopular tasks, and provide help. So as we organize more people into teams, givers have more opportunities to demonstrate their value. Givers are willing to work harder and longer than takers and matchers. So after a while, if like this person is so hardworking and doing everything, and then after a while, people just go to him or her for a lot of things to be done, right? So people may find that, oh, we can't work without that person around anymore. And the other thing that has changed now is that with increased automation, then service jobs are the ones that will probably remain going forward, right? More of that jobs that require human interactions. And then as service sector continues to expand, then more and more people are placing a premium on providers who have established relationships and reputations as givers. So we all hope that our doctors, our teachers, our dentists, plumber, real estate agent will focus on contributing value to us on what is best for us, right? And not to get as much out of us as possible. So these givers will do well when it comes to service jobs. So now we go back to the Belgian medical student study, right? So givers earn significantly lower grades, but that was only in their first year. By the second year, givers had made up the gap. They were now slightly outperforming their peers. By the sixth year, the givers earned substantially higher grades than their peers. by the 7th year, when they became doctors, they had climbed even further. So as students progressed through medical schools, they moved from independent classes into clinical rotations, internships, and patient care. The further they advance, the more their success depends on teamwork and service. Whereas takers sometimes win in independent roles where performance is only about individual results, givers thrive in interdependent roles where collaboration matters. And this is not just limited to medical industry. So an Australian bank conducted a study to find out the key factors that make financial advisors successful. So perhaps it's financial expertise, perhaps it's their effort. What they found is the single most influential factor was whether a financial advisor had the client's best interest at heart, above the company's and above his own interests. So then the CEO of the bank said, it was one of my top 3 priorities to get this value instilled and demonstrate that it is in everybody's best interest to treat clients that way. But is there room for givers in the professional life? Many of us feel that we want to sell ourselves as hardworking, as results-oriented. We don't want to sell ourselves as being kind, as compassionate in the workplace, right? So many choose matching as our primary reciprocity style at work. In a survey, only 8% identify themselves as givers. 92% are willing to contribute more than they receive, are not willing to contribute more than they received. And in another study, more than 3 times as many people prefer to be matchers than givers. So actually a lot of things in what the companies are doing is suppressing the giver culture, right? When a company has this forced ranking, you need to put certain number or percentage of people in the top performing or middle or underperforming, then you have forced ranking system. Then when a group of companies are vying for same clients, and then when school required grading curves, the normal curves, and then there are more supply than demand of desirable jobs, then it's natural to assume that people want to fight for the limited resources. So when we anticipate self-interested behavior from others, we fear that we will be exploited if we operate like givers. And so we conclude that pursuing a competitive orientation is the rational and appropriate thing to do. So when we fear the worst from others, then that brings out the worst in us as well. But in any case, numerous examples shows us that like giving not only is it professionally risky, but it can be rewarding as well. And then these givers reverse the popular plan that, okay, you succeed first, then you give back to society later. So they raise the possibility that those who give first are often best positioned for success later. So what should we tell ourselves when we want to adopt like a more giver mentality? Perhaps we can tell ourselves that, okay, I'll do this for you without expecting anything specific back from you, in the confident expectation that someone else will do something for me down the road. Because we are in all this interconnected world, right? So we never know when we will need help from another person. So when we are in a position to help, we just do it, and then in future we may benefit in other ways. Some other people may come around and help us. So yeah, when you're in a situation when you really need help, you will really, really appreciate when somebody extends that help to you. So then there are all this other research also to show like why givers make good leaders, right? One, givers are more likely to see interdependence as a source of strength, right? You don't depend on just one person. I don't have all the answers, right? There are different people with different strength, and then givers are able to harness the skills of multiple people for greater good. And then they are selfless, they're generous, and they always put the team ahead of themselves. And then givers understand that the best thing for them is to make the team the best that it can be. because they too will benefit when the team that they're in is the best team around. Givers expand the pie for everyone. And then givers don't exaggerate their own contribution relative to other people's input. So there's this research studies that like in a team work, right? So when they do survey of each individual person and ask them, what do you think is your contribution to the whole team? And then when they add up everybody's contribution, it adds up to 140%. So, and then when they change the perspective and then they ask the people first, okay, think of what your other team members are contributing to the group. And then put down your contribution to the group. So when you put other people's like perspective first, then the amount that came out, the total amount is 123. It's reduced from 140, but it's still higher than 100. So givers have this ability to imagine other people's perspective. The other attributes that make givers good leaders are, givers are inclined to see the potential in everyone. So there are studies to show that like if you think that like team members in your group have potential, you treat them as if they have the potential, then they tend to perform better than if you have low expectations of them. And then many of the world-class musicians had their initial interest sparked by teachers who were givers. And then takers are more susceptible to ego threat. Oh, actually it's a wrong spelling, threat. And are thus more vulnerable to escalation of commitment than givers. So, like if they have made the initial error, they have invested in something that turned out to be not progressing as well as they did, takers are more likely to, because of their ego, I will invest more. I'll just prove that like if I invest more, maybe the investment will turn out well. Just give it one more chance. Whereas givers are more concerned about protecting other people in the organization. So they are more willing to admit that, okay, maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I should kind of like step back and then not further commit more to this project. And then, takers also, because of their bigger ego, when they felt criticized, they are less willing to accept recommendations for improvement. Givers are willing to accept a blow to their pride and reputation in the short term in order to make better choices in the long term. And for takers, they often try to be the smartest person in the room. Givers are more receptive to expertise from others, even if it challenges their own beliefs, and they listen and they encourage others to speak up. Givers gain influence through prestige, i.e. others respect and admire them. So this kind of influence is more sustainable, whereas takers are more likely to go the dominant path, right? They want people to see them as powerful, strong, and authoritative. So there's this story of a film company that was facing financial pressure, and they hired this new president to try and like get things in order, right? So in order to cut costs, the president asked the two leaders of a division, Ed and LV, to conduct layoffs. And then Ed and LV resisted and said that eliminating employees would dilute the firm's value. The president issued an ultimatum. A list of names are due to him at 9 o'clock the next morning. So when the president received the list, the next morning it contained only two names, Ed and LV. So in the end, no layoffs were conducted, and a few months later, Steve Jobs bought the division from Lucasfilm and then started Pixar with Ed Catmull and LV Ray Smith. Employees were grateful that managers would put their own jobs on the line for the good of the teams. So more than a quarter of a century later, this still drives and inspires people at Pixar. The other benefits of givers. So research shows that givers get extra credit when they offer ideas that challenge the status quo, right? Because their intentions are not questioned, because people know that whatever they do is out of their genuine desire to contribute for the better of the team. when takers voice suggestions, then colleagues may be skeptical, right? So they may write them off as self-serving. Other studies have also shown that people make more accurate and creative decisions when they're choosing on behalf of others than themselves. When people make decisions in a self-focused state, then they are more likely to be biased by ego threat. And then often they agonize over trying to find a choice that's ideal in all possible dimensions. But when people focus on others as givers naturally, then they are less likely to worry about egos and minuscule details. They look at the big picture and prioritize what matters most to others. And other benefits of givers, it makes us happy, right? So psychologists Elizabeth Dunn, Lara Etkin, and Michael Norton, they let this group of people rate their happiness in the morning. And then they gave them each a $20 envelope with $20 inside. And then they told them to go and spend the $20 by 5 p.m. And then after that, at the end of the day, rate your happiness again. So what they found was that those who spent the money on themselves, their level of happiness didn't change. But those who spend the money on others, their level of happiness increased significantly. So psychologists call this the warm glow of giving. So similarly, like I stressed over this presentation for the last 1 week. So I'm sure after this is over, I'll be super happy. Okay, so what distinguishes successful and less successful givers? Right, so you need a healthy dose of self-interest as well. So because when we saw earlier, there were like the givers and then the givers at the top and givers at the bottom. So those at the bottom, probably they are the self-sacrificing givers. They don't have a lot of self-care, and as a result, then they actually are at a disadvantage. So people who are most successful, they are driven by a hybrid engine of self-interest and caring for others. The selfless givers give their time and energy without regard for their own needs, and they pay a price for it. So these are called the pathological altruism. It's an unhealthy focus on others to the detriment of one's needs. So being otherish, this is a term that the psychologists would use. It means that being willing to give more than you receive, but still keeping your own interests in sight, and using them as a guide for choosing when, where, how, and to whom you give. So there's this spectrum, right? Two parts of it: concern for others' interests and then concern for self-interest. So when you have low concern for others' interests and also low concern for your self-interest, then you're apathetic, right? When you have low concerns for others' interests but very high for your self-interest, then this person is very selfish. They are takers. And then when you have high concern for others but very low concern for self-interest, then these are the selfless people, self-sacrificing givers. So they don't do very well when people fall into this category. And then there's the otherish, when they have high concern for others and also high concern for themselves. So these are the successful givers. So what strategies can we use to make sure that we don't burn out, we engage in otherish giving? So one is, they call the chunking and sprinkling, right? So they did a study for people who volunteer, right? So one group of people, they volunteer maybe 1 hour a day or half an hour a day. So every day they have a commitment to volunteer. And then the other group of people, they decided that, okay, maybe out of 1 week, they will just spend 1 day doing the whole day volunteering work. Then they measure their happiness level. So it turns out that those who volunteer, like dedicated 1 day to do the volunteering work, they're happier than those who, like, every day they feel the commitment to have to volunteer. Because maybe every day they have so many other things to engage, to do, right? So they feel very stressed that they have to still spend time to do that volunteer work. But if they can allocate this specific time to do that, then they feel fulfilled and then they can manage it better. And then similarly for a software company. So this team of people, they try to have this giver culture in the office, and then they're trying to come up with the software. And then they are always helping, okay, anybody has any questions or they're stuck somewhere, then they can approach anybody in the team, right? So but because there are so many interruptions, then in the end, they are not meeting their deadlines. So this manager decided that, okay, we will set a time when you can actually approach people for help, right? So, but 3 days of the week is quiet time where all the engineers will just focus on your work. And then the remaining 2 days is free for all, you can approach anybody. So once they instituted that kind of like policy, productivity actually increased a lot. So this is what they call chunking. You chunk your giving, and then as opposed to sprinkling, like when you get interrupted all the time. Then the other strategies for otherish giving is to be able to kind of like also screen out fakers, right? So they say that there's a difference between people who are agreeable and people who are kind of like confrontational. Agreeable people doesn't mean they're givers, right? Sometimes they can just appear agreeable, but ultimately they are takers. So some people mistake agreeableness as givers, and then they give, and then in the end they ended up at a disadvantaged position. So we have to have this ability to kind of like screen, and also to be willing to adjust reciprocity style, right? So if you sometimes you give, and then you find that people are actually taking advantage of you, then yeah, there's self-interest. I think at some point you have to have a little bit of self-interest to protect yourself. Yeah. So then, of course, like when it comes to gender, women are more likely to be giver than takers. So studies have shown that when so women, they get generally less pay than men, right? One reason, among other reasons like discrimination, etc. One reason is that women also, when they ask for pay, they actually ask for lower pay because they feel that, okay, I don't want to be too assertive, and then etc. And then men generally ask for higher pay. So as a result, then men also ended up with more pay than women. So one way to counter that is when we negotiate, right? Then we take this on. If you're a giver, then don't think that you're negotiating for yourself, right? So if negotiating for pay, then I'm actually negotiating for my family. I'm an agent for my family, right? So I ask for what is fair for me, because it's not just for me, it's also for people around me, my family, etc. So that is one way where, so when they did that study, right? So when a giver go and negotiate, ask for starting pay, but then another group giver as well, but think of other people you're negotiating for, your friend or somebody else, representing somebody, advocating for somebody else. Then when they told them to do that, then they ask for a higher pay. So that's one strategy. And then, so when givers become a little bit more assertive, then they can actually win respect from people as well. So concluding thoughts. So you don't have to be a jerk to get ahead. So if your interactions are ruled by generosity, your rewards will follow suit, givers gain over time. And then it doesn't have to be I win then you lose situation all the time, right? It can be a win-win for all if we put away our self-centeredness and self-seeking tendencies and think about what is good for everyone. Say like the education system. If a system is such that, oh, the kids that did the best will go through, and then parents, if they are more self-interested, then they may, spend more time on tuition, get enrichment classes for the kids, etc. But there's another way to look at it, right? So parents can maybe focus their energy on advocating for a system that is more inclusive and more fairer for all. So in this world, yeah, there's actually a lot of resources. It's more than enough for everyone. So if those who have more than they will ever need share more, then yeah, we don't have to fight so much. So finally, the last part of the Buddha's teachings, that when we give, then we will have all these things in this world, and then we also get a heavenly rebirth, right? So how do we get a heavenly rebirth? So I guess when the last thought at the point of death is, they say, the most important thing, right? That will determine where you get reborn. So if you still have attachment at that point in time, at the point of death, then it's very likely that you will be reborn back in the samsaric world. So as you practice generosity, then the attachment slowly will be gone. Then less chances that you will have that much attachment at the point of death. But also, I've also kind of like been learning Pure Land Buddhism, right? So the Pure Land Buddhism is such that, like, to get out of the samsaric world, you need to actually clear all your negative karma, right? So it's quite impossible to clear our negative karma in this lifetime, right? So even when I'm preparing this, I say I'm so stressed. Why did I agree to do this, right? So I'm sure I've created negative karma. So it's difficult, it's completely impossible to not have negative karma, even in thought, in whatever, yeah. So the Pure Land teaching is such that, like, we will carry all our negative karma to Pure Land Buddhism, to Pure Land. So that's where the place is so abundance in everything else, right? So your greed will not arise, all the negative thoughts will not arise. So you are able to just focus on learning the Dharma and clarifying your negative karma, so that you can attain Buddhahood, gain enlightenment. So yeah. So the Pure Land teaching is the three things that you can attain rebirth in Pure Land, which is faith. You need to have faith that the Pure Land exists, and then you need to have aspiration that you want to go there, and then the third part is to practice the chanting, chanting of the Amitabha's name. So basically, this is the Pure Land teaching, yeah. So that's all for my talk today. Thank you very much.
So we say three sadhu to the speaker. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Don't worry, sister. I will talk to the office. Next topic will be on investment, how to relate to Buddhism. Okay, by the way, any question? Sister willing to take any question?
Thank you, Sister, for the talk. It was interesting to hear about the givers and takers and the matches. My question would be, is it nature or nurture? Because some of us may be takers in certain situations and givers in certain situations. And the tendency to do this, would it be created due to our surroundings that make us givers or takers? Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot of things in life, when you talk about nature or nurture, I think it's half-half. Yeah, there's a natural tendency that maybe you want to be giver or you want to be taker. But then situations, the place that you grow up in, like your early childhood. So every time if you're growing up in a very competitive environment, right? And then everything you do, the meal that you have to fight for it. So I think then it may condition you to be takers later on in life. So in everything in life, I think that's nature and nurture.
Thank you, sister. Just more like a comment rather than a question. So quite interestingly that about 2 weeks ago, actually, one of our leader actually was bringing it up in the management meeting about the glue work, right? So basically, these are the people who actually become a glue in the organizations, but they often bypass for promotion because they are not actually doing their work, because they are doing a lot of work for other people, right? So for example, in this case, it's a software engineer who is actually facilitating a lot of discussion with many people, and they've written so many few lines of code in a year, right? But without them, things will fall apart, right? So what is your thought on that? Yeah.
So if your management kind of like realizes this situation, then they should actually reward them for the role that they play, right? So each person in the team may perform different roles, so maybe they have different KPIs for different people. So like you say, if without them, then the team falls apart. Then they should be rewarded. They shouldn't be, yeah. So they should be, I don't know, as a leader, right? Leader doesn't do a lot of work, right?
Yeah. So I guess I'm also very pleased actually that was brought up, because I kind of at least from a management perspective, it was kind of like recognized that, you know. So in fact, we were told that, you know, across all the managers, can you make sure that, you know, you identify who are the people as a glue in the company, right? Because often they are really the people who is, you know, just bypass. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
My take is that wrong time, wrong place. Any more givers, takers, matches?
Sister, if you are a giver in the stock market, will you make money?
That clarified, but you got charged.
Yeah, like, so in the stock market, right, so if it's crashing, nobody is buying, then you give money to buy, then you make money, right? So you give the liquidity when nobody else is giving, then you're able to get stocks that are cheap.
Any more? Takers?
Sister Ling, just now there was this slide that you put up whereby it was something like when you give and then you don't expect something in return, but eventually somebody would give back to you, and I was just thinking that it just feels very. I mean, from Buddhist perspective, it's very karmic, but from a real life perspective, right? It's a little bit incredulous at my end. But I was just thinking, right, that it is just a theory that I have that I thought that when the individual practices giving, right, it actually affects his so-called bodily behavior, and it sends out signals in communication with other people when interacting. It sends out, because there's subliminal, how should I put this? When you communicate with the person, right? You don't just communicate via language. There's like eye contact. There's body language. There's a lot of these subliminal things that's going on. So when you practice giving, right, it actually modulates the whole way you communicate with an individual. And when you practice giving on a regular basis, I'm just thinking it will modulate your whole body language, so that when you talk to a person, the person kind of receives that signal that, hey, this guy is a giver, you know, rather than a faker. You know, there are some people who comes across in your workplace or in environment whereby they know that in order to achieve the sales target, right, they may pretend to be a giver, but actually they're not there to help you. They're there just to take something from you, but they pretend that they're a giver. So, but when you are a real giver, right, then that kind of sends out that signal that you are a giver, and people tend to be more trusting. I mean, it's just a theory that I thought. Yeah. What do you? Oh yeah, and regarding just now that individual who was talking about the stock market, right? Just one little comment. Like there have been many years when there are a lot of fund managers who take from their clients. They charge like a fixed fee. So I think Sister Hui Ling is part of this group of people who only takes when there's profit to be made. So it's not just a, they call it zero fee-based commission kind of, and they do pretty well. Yeah, they take only the profit bits. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for marketing for me.
What is your assessment? Do we have more givers or takers in Singapore?
I don't know. Singapore is a very competitive community, right? So generally,